Excelsior, true believers! You are about to embark upon a journey, a trip to the 70s and 80s when mighty Marvel Comics ruled over all. The Defenders, Doctor Strange, the Champions, Deathlock, the Submariner, the Incredible Hulk, Killraven, the Son of Satan, the Macabre Man-Thing, and all your other Bronze Age favorites every week appearing on Defenders Dialogue. Now here are your guides, Christopher Golden and Brian Keene.
Excelsior, true believers.
Excelsior indeed, Chris, and welcome back everyone to Defenders Dialogue. And Chris, I need to apologize to you and to our audience in advance.
Oh, what'd you do now, Brian?
Well, I think we talked about it on this show. If not, I've certainly mentioned it in my weekly newsletter. My 12-year-old son, Dungeon Master 77.1, and his mother have been living with Mary and I throughout the pandemic because she sold her house and then because of the pandemic couldn't find a new house. The market is horrible right now. Well, they found a place and I am helping them move this weekend. And all day yesterday and this morning, I've been on a 20-foot box truck for which the lift gate is broken, which means that I'm lifting all this furniture by myself up, not just up onto a truck, but up chest high with me.
You're not
onto a
supposed
truck.
to be doing stuff like that.
Oh, I know I'm not supposed to, but much like many of the Marvel characters that we cover here on this show, I do it anyway. But I'm in incredible pain. So if I suddenly cry out, it's because I twisted wrong in the seat. And it's not because I was passionate about the Man-Thing, although I do love these two issues.
See, I thought you cried out it was because you had shaved off your quarantine beard and no longer looked like Mandy Patinkin in Homeland.
I was waiting to see if you'd noticed that or not. I mean, obviously, I guess you knew. I tagged you on it on Twitter. But yeah, now I'm back to looking like our friend, author Tim Levin.
Yeah. Yeah, the American Tim Levin. There's nothing funnier than Tim Levin imitating Dick Van Dyke in Mary Poppins. In any case, listen, before we jump into Man-Thing, I have to say two things. First, I was so excited at seeing all the Marvel Cinematic Universe announcements yesterday. I don't know if you saw them all.
I saw several of them, yeah.
There's so much news, so much cool stuff coming. I'm excited to see that. And that's going forward. Going backward, though, I'm super excited because I thought I would announce what our special episode is going to be next week.
That's right. We should talk about that.
Next week's episode will be just a few days before Christmas, and we will be taking a break from the Man-Thing to cover the 1975 Marvel Treasury Edition giant superhero holiday grab bag.
That's right. So if you have one of those at home, jump ahead and read it. Chris is holding it up right now so I can see it. It's the big editions, which I loved as a kid.
I used to, when I was a little kid, my uncle had a store in Chatham, Massachusetts, which is on Cape Cod. And down the street from his store, there was a little sort of five and dime called the Mayflower. And the Mayflower was where I got my comics all summer long in those days.
Right.
And the Mayflower could always be counted on. They had the spinner racks, but they could always be counted on to have the Marvel Treasury editions on a shelf. And that's where I got many of the Marvel Treasury editions that came out in the 70s. But I haven't looked at any of them probably since the 80s or early 80s, maybe the 70s. So
I tracked the Defenders when you and I covered the Defenders Treasury Edition. Or no, excuse me, the Howard the Duck Treasury Edition when we were doing Defenders on this show. But other than that, the only one I go back and revisit regularly is Jack Kirby's 2001. Because I still say that's Kirby's best art ever. In that giant format, it's just really eye-popping, and I go back and look at that quite often just to marvel over it.
No pun intended. And before we continue,
don't make me laugh. It hurts my back.
Before we continue, I would like to say that I want to personally welcome the fourth listener to our show.
Oh, we picked up
a new listener who joined us recently in our show, Hank Wagner's granddaughter, Emma.
That's right.
Hank says he managed to stay awake through all of last week's episode. Usually, as you know, he falls asleep to our dulcet tones. Last week, apparently, he and Emma were listening to the show together, and Hank managed to stay awake for the whole show, but we did help put Emma to sleep.
That's right. So, Emma,
good night, Emma.
Listening right now. This is Uncle Brian. I know that Grandpa is saying that it's time to go to sleep, but it's not, Emma. It's time to party. Tell Grandpa that he can sleep later. He needs to spend time with you right now. Stay up late, watch movies, and listen to this podcast.
Emma, no matter what Grandpa says, you are allowed to play with his glasses.
That's right. That's right. Absolutely.
All right. So The Man-Thing, issue 13, written by Gerber, layouts by John Buscema, and finished art by Tom Sutton. This is a really interesting story, Brian. And once again, I think we have the situation where Gerber comes up with ideas and then just sort of figures out what comic book he's currently writing that he could most easily shoehorn his idea into. Because this is something clearly he wanted to do. And he was like, yeah, I could work that into Man-Thing somehow. And that's not a criticism. He's just brilliant with that. I mean, I've done the same thing a million times. And so I really like this. It's really weird. I also noted, and maybe this is just the first time I've noticed, but this was the first time I noticed him. He's not calling him the Man-Thing. He's just calling him Man-Thing. Yep.
I noticed that too.
Which to me is like Ben Grimm. Nobody calls Ben Grimm Thing. I guess sometimes they do, but certainly in captions, they refer to him as the Thing.
Right. Yeah, here and Giant Size Man-Thing issue 3, because I've been reading ahead a little bit. They both came out right around the same time, this issue and that. And in both of them, he abandons the, and he's just using Man-Thing, which indicates to me that as a writer,
subject matter, like the fact that we noticed this, are we too close to this?
No, I mean, I think we noticed it because we're writers, because I think it indicates as a writer, Gerber was probably really hitting his stride with the character and figuring out who Man-Thing actually is and what he wants to do with him.
All right, well, set us up with Red Sails at 40,000 feet.
Yeah, so we open in the Everglades where the swamp meets the sea. And the Man-Thing is staring out at a cargo ship, and he sort of wanders up to it. And as any sailor will tell you, including myself, this is the suckiest part of a voyage. This is the onloading when they're loading all the cargo onto the ship. And Man-Thing himself gets accidentally loaded up with the rest of the cargo. And he overhears two men talking.
Yeah, well, so the two men are arguing, which is what draws him in, the hostility between them. He's attracted to that level of emotion. It draws him in. And so he sort of slides between two crates. And when the men are done with their argument, the crates are loaded, and he is unintentionally loaded along with them. The two guys are Captain Matson, who's the captain of this cargo ship, and the owner of the ship, whose name escapes me at the moment.
Lipton, like the tea or the soup.
And they're arguing about a character we'll meet in a moment, a woman named Dr. Moira Lipton. Spinner.
Yep.
Dr. Moira Spinner. Lipton is the owner. Because Dr. Spinner and her group of researchers have paid the owner Lipton to hire out the boat to take them out into the center, the very center of the Bermuda Triangle, to spend a couple of days taking readings, doing research, all of that. Captain Matson is not happy.
No, he, he's very much an old school blue collar sailor. He says that it's dangerous. Lipton accuses him of being superstitious. And the captain I like. He says, look, I don't know what I believe, but I do know a lot of ships have sailed out that way and never came back. You're risking my life. You're risking my crew's life. And, I protest.
One of the things, and I'm saying this before we get there, by the way, it's Dr. Mora, not Moira, Dr. Mora Spinner. One of the things I love about Gerber is how you never know what random tangents his stories are going to leap off into. Right. It's like having a conversation with Bugs Bunny in many ways. It's like, so we have this thing. You think it's a Bermuda Triangle story, but we'll get to that in a second. So the man thing now, as the boat departs, the further away he moves from the swamp, the weaker he becomes, and the more his body dries out. His life is connected to the swamp water. So, Captain Matson greets Dr. Spinner and her team of researchers. They depart. The man thing dries out so much that he's basically on the verge of death in the hold, Brian. Yeah.
He's drying out in the hole. The doctor and the captain are arguing, he tells her, he says, he appreciates her scientific endeavor, but he doesn't like messing with mysteries. And she tells him, well, that's what a scientist does. We mess with mysteries. So anyway, she goes down in the hold to check her equipment. And while she's down there, she sees that everything's been tossed around and smashed. And she thinks it's because they didn't stow it properly. She doesn't realize it's because the man thing was trying to get out. But then a very weakened man thing reaches out and grabs her ankle in the dark. And what happens, Chris?
She screams in fear, and whatever knows fear, Brian, burns
at the man thing's touch.
Yeah, so basically the crew hear her screaming. They run down into the hold. Dr. Matson and the crew Captain Matson and the crew pull her away. They discover the man thing's presence, obviously, but he's basically on the verge of death. And perhaps they think at that moment that he has died. So basically, the captain is about to, they hook him up to with a net to a winch.
Yeah, they're going to drop him out in the water.
Yeah, they're going to dump him in the ocean until Dr. Spinner says, well, hang on. This is crazy. I'm a scientist, and this thing is dead anyway. I need to study it, which is always the worst choice you can make in a horror movie. But so they take it back on board, Brian. Dr. Spinner and Captain Matson have another, conversation that seems almost like a flirtation at a certain point. It seems like they're recognizing in one another an expertise in what they do. But then here's where Gerber takes that Bugs Bunny tangent, because you think the story is one kind of story, which is a Bermuda Triangle story that happens to involve the man thing, and then it becomes something else.
That's right. We get the introduction of another one of Man Thing's rogues gallery. As I've said before, he has the third strangest rogues gallery, third only to Howard the Duck and the Defenders. But a giant 18th century ghost ship with blood red sails doesn't sail across the sea towards them, does it, Chris? No, it sails out of the sky.
This is my sweet spot, Brian.
Yeah, it's a gorgeous double splash page.
Oh, yeah. It's absolutely gorgeous. And it is also my sweet spot. All I could think about was, like, what year did this come out and what year did The Fog come out? Yep. I actually know that that this comic, I think, came out prior to the Fog.
This issue was 1975.
Yeah, so earlier than the Fog, but I just love it. It's a ghost ship, sort of, Basically, it's a ship full of cursed pirates. They call themselves privateers, but we know the difference. Who basically they're solid, but they can become sort of ghostly to go back and forth from the surface, from the ship on the surface to their floating brigantine. And you think that they're there to rob and to be pirates. But why are they actually there, Brian?
Well, we're going to get to that in a moment. But first, I have to sidetrack us. Okay. You're reading these in the collected editions. I'm reading them in their original issue formats.
Okay.
And right now, after that double splash, I'm on the letters page. And I'm very excited because when you were a kid, did you collect the Marvel value stamps?
No, I would never cut anything out of a comic book.
I collected them. And I sent away, and I forget what I got in the mail for sending them away, but this is one of the ones that I was missing. It's Shauna the She-Devil, Marvel value stamp number 54. Of course, nowadays I can't cut it out, and I doubt you could send them away anymore. I don't know. I a strong bit of nostalgia. So anyway, yeah, you asked me why the pirates are really there. Well, they're looking for somebody. We find out they've been cursed by somebody named Cordes. Khordes. I suppose I'm pronouncing that right. And they're looking for somebody.
Yeah, they're looking for Mora Spinner, Dr. Mora Spinner. She doesn't recognize any of them. She doesn't know why they're there. It's an 18th century brigantine, cursed. And she's a very modern, woman, a doctor, a scientist. But nevertheless, they believe that they know her and they've come for her, and they spirit her away back up to their floating ship. And, the captain wants to stop them. Captain wants to do something about it. But they also take what they believe is the corpse of the Man-Thing, Brian.
That's right. Because they think that when they next meet this mysterious Cordes, they might be able to use the monster. So they all float up into the sky with the Man-Thing and the Doctor. The captain watches them go, helpless to do anything. And then they're on the deck of the pirate ship, floating off into space, Chris.
I know, but that's the part that I didn't initially get, and I want to make clear to people, they're not just flying in the sky at this point. They're in space.
That's right. Beyond the clouds toward the icy depths of space, the caption tells us.
Because why not? I mean, that's Gerber's thing. I imagine editors working with Gerber would go, "Why are they in space?" And he would say, "Why not in space?"
See, I love it. I'm an ex-sailor, and my dream of all dreams is to go into outer space. If I can combine those two things, hell yeah.
Yeah. Well, and we should say, by the way, that the pirate captain is known as Captain Fate.
That's right. And this is not, these two issues are not the only time we'll see him. He shows up to bedevil the Man-Thing again. Anyway, the Man-Thing, we then get something new. We learn something new about the character here with issue 13. As we know, the swamp is what he derives his strength from. But he has a second source of strength, sorcery. And the caption tells us there's sorcery at work here, a suspension of natural law, and there is evil afoot. Due to the former, Man-Thing can survive without the swamp to nourish him. Mm-hmm. So we've now learned that if you take him out of the Everglades, as we've seen before, we've seen him in New York City. We see him now in this situation. Supposedly he loses all his power. Not necessarily so, if there's magic around.
No. Anything that suspends the laws of reality or whatever.
Right.
So the Man-Thing comes around, and immediately he senses Mora's distress, and he goes to try to help her. The pirates rage and go after him. He starts to smash them and throws a few of them overboard into space, which I'm like, it makes me wonder if, even though this story does come to a conclusion, if somewhere in the Marvel universe and, out in space, there are a couple of pirates protected by the curse that's on them to keep them alive forever, floating around in space.
I like to think they've been picked up by the Starjammers from the X-Men comic books and are members of that crew of misfits now. So, Chris, I want to call attention here. I don't know if you noticed it or not, but during the battle with the pirates, some of the best Man-Thing artwork I've ever seen. There's a widescreen panel there where the pirates are fighting him, and you see him sort of spreading out and oozing all over. And if you look close, you can see the points from their swords and their cutlasses sticking up through the muck.
Yeah.
It's really well drawn. I really, really like that.
Yeah, it's good. I also love these few panels where one of the pirates basically leaps at him to try to do some kind of a drop kick and ends up knees deep in the Man-Thing's chest and dangling backwards, hanging out of the Man-Thing.
Unfortunately, there's only one Man-Thing, and there's dozens and dozens of pirates. And by sheer numbers alone, they manage to force him over the side of the ship. There's just one problem. Instead of falling into the ocean, he falls into outer space.
Yes, the Man-Thing is floating in outer space, beginning to freeze over. This is, I really enjoyed the movie Gravity, but I feel like they should have made this instead. Now, Man-Thing number 14, which is written by Gerber with art by Alfredo Alcala, it's called Tower of the Satyr. And just when you thought there couldn't be more tangents and diversions, Gerber decides that this story is about something completely other than what. So first, it's the Bermuda Triangle story. The scientists going to see Bermuda Triangle. Then it's the ghost pirate ship, cursed, ship. Then it's ghost pirates in outer space. The Man-Thing along for the ride throughout this. Now we take a trip back to the origin of that curse, and we discover that there's actually a fantasy element at the core of this whole thing.
Because why not?
Because what? Because why not? I mean, that is. And so the thing is, like I really enjoyed these two issues, and it's so funny because in comparison to issues 11 and 12, which we were both really disappointed with last week, this is much more interesting, much more fun to me. So, the Man-Thing, frozen, floating in space, plummets through Earth's atmosphere and becomes a ball of fire and plunges into the ocean just off of the prow of the ship that we had been dealing with before, the ship, right. The freighter Marietta,
right,
under Captain Matson.
That's right, and Captain Matson, he's still recovering from Captain Fate's attack. He's bemoaning the fact that Mara has been kidnapped, and we get a several page flashback to the previous issue. And then we rejoin Captain Fate and his crew on their ship.
What we didn't say last issue, but we'll get a much more certain explanation for here, is that the reason that they have abducted Mora Spinner from the deck of the Marietta is that, according to them, she is the real captain of their crew. Captain Fate was the first mate, and Mora was the real pirate captain 160 years ago, or whatever it might be.
Right.
And that they can't break the curse that Cortez has put on them without her. So they need her to help them break the curse that traps them in this thing. Now, how has this woman had this life? Does she not know who they are? We will discover the answers to those as Gerber invents them.
We do see she gets in a fight with the crew, and she handles herself amazingly well. I mean, she's got moves like Daredevil, But she seems surprised that she has these moves.
Especially with her ability to wield a sword.
Yeah.
So Captain Fate has sent her down below to dress like a pirate, basically, to put on her uniform. And she comes up much more dressed for the part. But again, as you're saying, like, she doesn't have any memory of this person they claim she was. And yet once she starts to get in a fight with them, we realize that, clearly her body remembers. She puts Captain Fate to the sword and demands he explain it all, and then we get the story.
That's right. 180 years ago, they were also in the Bermuda Triangle, this part of the Bermuda Triangle, and they heard rumors about a tiny, uncharted island with a strange treasure tower. So they set sail to find it, and find it they did. But the tower had no doors or windows. There was no way in to get the treasure. So she decided she would climb it. And she did. Barefoot, she climbed it up while her men watched from below, and she reached the top. And then they followed her up.
Yeah. She goes down inside. There is an entrance at the top. She goes down inside and she throws a rope down. They climb up. They join her, and they find treasure inside. But they also find Cordis, half man, half goat. He rose up in flames out of the treasure, a wizard, a thing out of hell, bony and withered as old as the sea itself. This is what they're saying anyway. But he says, put away your swords, give me what I want, and you can have as much treasure as you desire. I want only one thing in return. I have need of a woman with whom to mate, one whose charms will replenish my youth and virility. So he basically wants the captain. He wants Mara. He traps her in this weird magical cage, and her crew abandon her, Brian. They take the treasure and they leave.
Yep. And as soon as they're gone, Cortez sets her free. But fool that the satyr was, he didn't take away her sword. So she strikes him with the sword and runs upstairs and finds that her crew has abandoned her. She sees the ship sailing off. And she says, she curses them. She says, may you never reach port, never enjoy your new wealth, but sail on forever, beyond time, beyond even death.
So really, it's she who has cursed them.
Well, yeah, Cortez is standing behind her, and he's dying from the blow. And he says, if that's your wish, I'll make it so. He says, I only sought your love. I didn't mean to hurt you, but I see there's no love in you. You must learn how to give of yourself. Thrice, that means 3, you shall live and die before you return to the sea. Then he dies. The tower sinks into the sea. And that brings us back to the present.
Yeah, so he's saying she's going to have 3 lifetimes. And this is her 3rd lifetime.
That's
so
right.
She has been reincarnated twice and lived her life as Mara Spinner in this case. Now, she's basically saying, she admits it. She must be Mara. Now, the tower, after this, sank down into the ocean. The whole little island the tower was on, as the satyr Cordis died, it sank down into the ocean. But now, what has fallen next to the tower, Brian, underwater, is the body of the man-thing.
That's right. He's just a shapeless chunk of goo hurled down from space.
There are days when I look in the mirror, Brian, and I think to myself, you look like a shapeless chunk of goo.
But, although Cortez is dead all these 180 years, sorcery is apparently still potent enough to merge with the magic that once before affected the body of Ted Salas and made him the man-thing. And that's what happens. The man-thing reforms beneath the ocean, beneath the Bermuda Triangle, swims up to the ruins of the tower, finds Cortez's skeleton, and touches it. And suddenly there is a light, Chris.
Yeah, there is a light, and the tower begins to rise once more. The little island upon which the tower sits rises up above the water again in the middle of a storm. The ship, the freighter Marietta, beaches itself on this little island. The people on this ship are just cursed, They're just like... so they're beached on this little island. The red-sailed ghost pirate ship is floating above in the sky. And the crew and the captain of the Marietta see the pirates basically beam themselves down to the roof of the tower, and the freighter crew down below decide they're going to climb the tower. They're going to use the boom from the crane that's on the freighter to climb up.
Right.
So all of our characters are coming together in one place, and when they get up to the top of the tower, Brian, what do they discover?
They discover that Cortez is alive. The sorcery that imbued the Man-Thing and brought him back to life has also brought Cortez back to life.
And the pirates decide, well, Cortez, they're about to get their vengeance on him. Cortez sees Mora, and she says, you hold my future in your bony little hands. Will you lift the curse upon us? Cortez says, I shall, if you consent to remain with me this time and accept the love you callously destroyed 3 lifetimes ago. She's furious. Even if I had love to waste on you, I wouldn't give it to a shriveled old thing like you. She orders her men to kill him. They rush at Cortez, but the Man-Thing steps in the way, Brian. But of course, the swords are no good against him. He makes short work of some of them, but Captain Fate and Mora corner Cortez.
That's right. And Cortez pleads with her. He says, you would kill me, Mora, to aid this man who abandoned you for mere gold. He warns her, Captain Fate would have killed her. And Captain Fate says, shut your lying mouth and die, Goatman. But before he can deliver the fatal blow, the captain from the freighter Marietta, he's had enough of this bullshit. He shoots Captain Fate in the back. Because the curse is lifted, it works. Captain Fate falls dead.
Yeah. Captain Fate falls dead for the moment. And Mora is pissed. Do you have any idea what you've done? You've handed my life over to this little horned monstrosity. She's about to attack Captain Matson of the freighter with her sword, but the Man-Thing stops her from doing that, hurls her aside. And then we get a conversation between Cortez, this ancient satyr resurrected, and Captain Matson of the freighter Marietta. And here's the thing, Brian, that really bothered me about this story. Now, Cortez has a whole different story of what he intended all along. He's like, no. I never wanted to force her to surrender herself to me and stay with me forever so we could mate. Even though that's what he said before, I was like, no, that was never my intention. My intention was to save her because I could tell that her crew were about to betray her. They were going to rise up and mutiny against her and probably kill her. And I only did it to save her or to attempt to save her. I don't know. I was just like, a satyr will say anything to get out of trouble, I guess.
It's true. It's true. But yeah, he ends with, just as Captain Fate's ego could no longer tolerate her domination, she could not admit she was losing control of him and the other men. He says, I'd never encountered a woman of such spirit. And Captain Matson says, that's pretty strong stuff coming from the creature who's supposed to represent man's desires. And, just in case Gerber didn't get it across to all of us at the time in 1975, she says, the symbolism was not lost on me, Captain. So she decides, long story short, to stay with him.
Yeah, she decides that she is going to put everybody else before herself at this point. She's going to stay with him. She says, I'm not sure why, but I feel I must. Again, I'm not I'm not thrilled with this conclusion. I like the story up until this point, but I was just like, it just seems weird that there's no better explanation for her decision to stay behind. But basically, the Man-Thing by now is still on the island, but the freighter goes away. The island and the tower sink once again beneath the ocean in the Bermuda Triangle. And then later we cut to the beach in Port Everglades.
That's right.
Not far from
where
the Man-Thing
we started.
Hangs out.
Yeah, there's a dock worker, and he frowns. He sees what he thinks is an oil slick on the water. But the oil slick is actually the Man-Thing, and it rises up and wades onto the beach. The dock worker flees. But we're told that, Cortez's magic now imbues the man. Perhaps his youth, his virility has been replenished. And Gerber asks us, who can say what feats he might accomplish next? Well, we'll find out in 2 weeks, not next week, because as Chris said, next week we're going to take a break and we're going to do Marvel Treasury Edition Holiday Grab Bag. But in 2 weeks, we'll find out.
And, Brian, I have to say that I'm glad we're taking this break to do the 1975 Marvel Treasury Edition Giant Superhero Holiday Grab Bag, because I did flip ahead a little bit to Giant Size Man-Thing number 3, and it looks like it's once again one of those stories that you love and I don't love.
Oh yeah, for those of you, I see your tweets and your emails for those saying, when's it going to get back to Kim and Jennifer Kale and Korek the Barbarian? Very soon, very soon.
Yeah, the next time we cover the Man-Thing, it will be back to those characters, and Brian will be thrilled, and I'll make fun of Jennifer Kale's outfit, and we'll go from there.
Something else I want to bring up right here before we sign off. We all have new books out, and by all I mean you, me, and our engineer Matt Wilderson. So you have out Red Hands.
Yes, sir.
And my new book, it's a collaboration with John Urbancic. It's called Nemesis. That is now out in paperback and Kindle. And Matt has, I think, 2 new books out. So if only, Chris, there was one place online where you don't have to wear a mask, where you could just go and you could type each of our names in, and those books would come out. You could go there and you could type in Matt Wilderson and then type in Christopher Golden and then type in Brian Keene. There is Amazon, Amazon.com. So if
Brian, I'm going to interrupt you and say that is true. You could do that. But I suspect that there are other places that you could also order those books. You could call your local bookseller and ask them to order those books for you. You might also even be able to contact or go online to bookshop.org, which supports your local bookshops.
Right.
So just a thought.
It's a great thought. My thought process was, it's the holidays and folks are going to get those Amazon gift cards.
That's true. If you want to use your Amazon gift card, there's no better way than buying books by us.
All right, folks. Well, that is it for this week. I am going to go rub Ben Gay all over my body.
I think you should just ask Mary to line the inside of your bathtub with it, and you can get in and you could sort of slide around in there.
I got in last night and I put in some Dr. Teal's lavender Epsom salt. And I soaked for a good hour, and then I tried to get out of the tub, and I couldn't move.
I believe my friend Brian Keene once told me that whiskey helps.
Whiskey does help, but it occurred to me the other day. Boy, we're really off tangent now. Since the pandemic started, I've only drank twice.
Yeah.
And that occurred to me, and I was like, you know what? I think I might keep going with that. So I'm avoiding the whiskey if I can.
I think that's a good plan.
Yeah.
I also want to point out, by the way, the last thing we'll say off topic here is that as listeners of this show know, and people who follow you on Twitter know, you had grown quite a quarantine beard, which we talked about at the opening of the show. And you looked with your hair grown in and your beard grown in very much like Mandy Patinkin in his role as Saul Berenson on Homeland. Now, Mandy had also allowed his beard to continue to grow throughout the presidential election season. He and his wife were making videos about the election and posting them online. I saw a new video that Mandy posted on Twitter this morning, and he has basically trimmed himself so that he now looks like Brian Keene.
Well, yeah.
And I feel like he may have been so inspired by your new cleaner look that he said, oh, you know what? I don't want to look like Saul Berenson anymore. I want to look like Brian Keene.
Imitation is the sincerest form of flattery.
All right. On that note, happy holidays, everybody. More on the holidays next week because I'm so excited to cover this holiday grab bag and reminisce with my friend Brian. Excelsior, true believers.
Excelsior indeed. See you next week, folks.
Defenders Dialogue. You can listen to this episode and all previous episodes for free on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, YouTube, Google Play Music, and wherever else podcasts are available. Defenders Dialogue is written and produced by Brian Keene and Christopher Golden. Our theme music is by Xander Harris. Our engineer is Matt Wilderson. Check out his books on Amazon.com.